Hey guys, thanks for tuning in today. I'm really excited actually to have Daniil on with me for the first time. He's another MVP that I've had contact with through conferences and other stuff, and just in the Twitterverse and online for the last couple of years. And he actually came up to me with a really cool idea of kind of doing this water cooler conversation series around various ideas from Power BI and the Power Platform. And today we're actually going to talk about some cool things related to DAX and, in a sense, discussing best practices from the opposite end of the spectrum, whereby we actually want to look at like practices to avoid to help encourage ways to do things correctly. As Daniel has with the word is kind of an anti-pattern. So I really, really like that idea. But Daniel, I'd love for you to give a bit of a background about yourself and then elaborate a little bit on what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, thanks, Reed. Thanks for agreeing to host me here.
Hmm.
That's quite nice. And yeah, a good description of what we're gonna do. So we're gonna, talk about things you should avoid in the code. Actually, now that I think about it, I should probably have started with my introduction. So anyway, in case you don't know who I am, and I expect that's most of you, I am an Microsoft MVP, like Reed said. I also am the author of the official Power BI exam reference books. So in case you're going to take the DA 100 exam and you like reading books, then you can read my book. And I am a big fan of Power BI in general. Been using it since it became available. Massive fan. Um, I think that's pretty much it. Well, I'm an independent consultant. So
Hmm.
like Reed, I go from client to client. I notice what people are doing, and I started noticing some patterns. And so I thought I should write them down and show people a better way of doing things. So that's how this idea, the idea for this series was born. I thought I'm going to show uh, like one example at a time of how you can improve your DAX code, or maybe we'll talk about other things later, but for now it's going to be DAX. And yeah, this is the pilot episode. If it gets good feedback, then we might continue with the series, because I have a sizable list of things I wanted to cover. So for now, it's going to be just one thing, but in the future, I have more things to show. Um, so yeah,
Awesome. And
we
like
can start, I
the
guess.
the other phrase that I liked from a blog post quite a few years back from Gil Revive, now before he actually switched over to Amazon and everything, is pitfalls, like common pitfalls to avoid. The things that I've noticed is a very common pattern. That's, in his case, it was Power Query, but I think this will be a great conversation as well in DAX. Or what are common mistakes that like people getting started with DAX make, where it might not be necessarily noticeable that this is a mistake, but identifying those to help people avoid them and start to implement better practices that way. So yeah, I'm absolutely happy to have these conversations. I think it will be a fun change up for the channel as well too, just to discuss some of these uh, professional opinions through just a lot of vetted time with clients and just noticing trends across just so many different models and scenarios over the years.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, you're exactly right. Um, Gil did have a series, and I think it was like 10 pitfalls or something like
Hmm.
that. And it had this cool image with 80s or 90s style games,
It was from
Um,
Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure. It was a Atari game way back in the day. Yeah.
way back in the day. I wonder if it was, if it existed before I was born or something, but
Even our time,
yeah.
I think, because like I mean, I was a Nintendo kid, and that was like late '70s, I think, or early '80s when that came out.
Okay. Well, then definitely older than I am.
Exactly.
Okay, good stuff. Okay,
Yeah,
we
I
can
can
start, I
go ahead
guess.
and flip over, and then yeah, we can walk through some of these common patterns.
Yeah, good stuff. Um, all right. So the first kind of episode, the pilot episode, is about the switch function.
Mm.
I
Hmm.
see time and again how it's misused, I should say. While it doesn't necessarily affect performance in noticeable ways, it certainly affects readability. And as some people say, the code is written for people to read and then incidentally for machines to execute. So it's very important that your code is readable, right? So for that reason, you should strive to make your code easy to understand for others, and that includes actually future you, because how many times did you open your own code months after you wrote it and you were like, what am I doing here? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Certainly happened a few times to me. So let me show you the first example. And I think I'm gonna try to zoom in a bit.
There you go. That should be good.
Yeah, that should be good.
Yeah.
So have you seen something like this before?
Oh yeah, I mean it's similar. You just yeah, switch to is probably the most common pattern that I see anybody ever use switch with. Just because you're basically just doing a series of conditional checks. But yeah, you put a column into there, checking against that. Looks like in this case you're actually doing a column check since this is the column. But I've also seen a lot of people do that where they declare a measure like 13 times without a variable or something, and it ends up becoming like, oh, why is my calculation slow? Well, you're about 8 measures deep. This measure references that measure, which references 3 other measures, and then you want to know why it's running slow.
Yeah, yeah. I actually remember one guy came to me and he was like, my measure is so slow, can you help me? Then it was exactly as you described. He referenced multiple measures, and the problem is that he referenced each of them multiple times. So it took me just a few seconds to convert those measures to variables, and it was okay because he didn't use any calculator or anything. And the measure now took like a couple of seconds instead of like a minute before. So yeah, it can be quite problematic. And you are right, SwitchTrue is a common pattern. And I should probably mention that it wasn't always like that. At some point in the beginning of DAX time, it was considered a novelty. And let me show you something I actually prepared. Here, this is an article from P3 Adaptive, previously known as Power Pivot Pro, from 2012. So it's quite not old, but it's one of the original, I guess, articles on DAX. So here, it's a guest post, and they talk about, Colin talks about the switch true pattern, and this is an example that he gives, which is the same one as I have for month numbers. So he's saying that instead of using nested ifs, you can use switch, yes, and then later there's an example with switch true at the bottom. And the thing that I wanted to show you is that, check out the first comment.
Oh yeah, from Marco.
From Marco. You see, Marco was impressed with this DAX trick. That should tell you something. It was really cool trick back in the day. So yeah. Now, back to the example. I would question the need for switch true in this case. Do we really need it? I'm not so sure, because we are only checking one value against a series of values. The checks aren't like inequalities, or they're not complex. So what's the need? And that makes your code just longer, and it's unnecessarily long, I would say. So what I would do is I would change, like I would get rid of this, like this, of this, and put like this, okay? So yep, that's it. So you see, now your code is shorter. I would argue it's easier to understand as well, because not everyone might be familiar with switch true. So yeah, by the way, I used a keyboard shortcut here. If you noticed, I just selected everything at once, like all the strings that were the same in the code. I used Control-Shift-L. So let me show you another example. Yeah, you see,
It's very useful.
Yeah, I'm selecting everything at once, so I can get rid of all quotations if I wanted, but I'm not gonna do that. So yeah, Control-Shift-L.
So
And something else.
interestingly, you have a couple trailing spaces at M and the J's and the A's. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, thanks for noticing.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so it's for cases when you have very little space, and you want to use single letter like month names. So if
Mm.
you use like M, for example, like this, which is the same as M here, you will
Okay.
not
Okay.
be able to use to sort this new column by month number, right? Because it's gonna tell you
Gotcha.
M is 3 and 5. So that's why you need like a space here. But if you have trailing spaces, it will not show up in your visuals because it's just white space. But you will still be able to use single letter month names.
That makes sense. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, because there's still distinct values to allow you to sort. Otherwise, you hit with that one-to-one error, which you would like it, which you would do if you tried to use the sort by column.
yeah, that's right. Actually,
Yeah.
I think I had an article or a blog post on sort by column, and it turns out that it doesn't have to be one-to-one. So if you have, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, and you're trying to sort these values by letters,
Mm-hmm.
um, then it's okay if one number corresponds to, um, it's okay if one letter corresponds to one number.
Oh
Then
yes,
they will be sorted alphabetically.
I have I
So
have
yeah.
seen that a couple of times. Honestly, more as an error, where there was a few times where
Mm.
I had three distinct values in a column, but it had a custom sort applied to it, and based off of I think just some bad data, like there was four distinct values showing in like a table if I dragged and dropped it, and for the life of me, I was trying to figure out. There's a distinct count of three. There's a count of three in the column. I go to the model view and I look. There's only three values in there. Why is it showing four? Is there a space? And then you realize, oh no, it's the
Yeah.
sort by because the J has both a sort rank of number one and number two, so it's going to show as two separate rows. But it's not obvious unless you know where to look for it. That's a very like buried setting. So like the first time that I stumbled across that, now I don't know to look for it. It took me a long while of just like throwing up my hands, like I don't know why this is not working properly because nothing really indicates to you other than just the thing that there's an oddity with the sort.
Yeah, you're right. And there is a check when you apply a sort by column
Mhm.
setting. It does check if everything is okay. But if you change your data, then it's not going to check that. It's going to assume that it's been checked, so no need to check. And then you will
And that's
get
where the
this
issue
issue
came.
that you.
Yep, and
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
I've seen that a couple
yeah,
of times with clients where they're grabbing data from Excel. They apply their own custom sort to like a manual, let's call it a manual dimension table that they're housing in Excel when they treat it as a database. Which, uh, if you can, please do not do that. But a lot of people do, sadly. But Excel is not a database. And then later on, it refreshes it like, why am I getting two rows for marketing? Oh, it's because at some point you added a subcategory and you forgot to update the ranking to be unique. You copied and pasted the wrong value in the wrong cell, and it does refresh
yeah,
successfully, but then you get those weird little nuances that happen.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like your technique with Switch. I think it's honestly, I would actually say that most people know Switch via SwitchTrue because almost all articles that show you how to use Switch is usually some type of a SwitchTrue pattern. Certainly, that's
Yeah.
the most common way I use it. But SwitchTrue really should only be used if you are doing multiple types of logic checks. Like one of the conditions is checking your sales amount. Another one might be looking at
Yep.
forecast and all these different things that are going on. SwitchTrue works. But if you're only
Yep.
looking at one single column or one single measure, then you really just need to declare that calculation at the top in the condition check, and then everything else that you've done is just patterned down through here. Out of curiosity, when you run this in DAX Studio, is there any performance difference or is it just more readable?
Um, I don't think there is any noticeable difference, just
Hmm.
a bit more readable, because this is quite simple anyway. If this were some measures or something, then I would probably change my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. But there are times where, I mean, even with variables, I use them not because it makes it faster; it makes it more readable. So sometimes you
Hmm.
do develop things in a way to make it a bit easier to read for yourself or the person you're handing it off to. Um, a thing that actually just popped into my head is like an if statement. Like you don't have to provide an alternative result; it automatically returns blank. I like to write my
Yep.
code as short as possible. But for somebody
Hmm.
who's not too familiar with DAX, if I'm handing a model off, I still might actually type in blank to make it very clear
Yeah.
that's what it's returning because they might not realize, like, if I just close it off, they don't actually understand, oh yeah, it automatically does that. So like there's a difference between optimized and readable for the person you're providing this as a delivery to sometimes. So I will occasionally write
You're right.
longer formulas just to make sure that it's easier to read for whomever will be the model owner for that in the future.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It does matter who is reading stuff. If it's a
Hmm.
beginner, then they might need a bit of hand holding or whatever is the expression in English.
Exactly. I like to use the
Mm.
term guardrails. I think of it like the
Oh, okay.
or like a track that they can follow.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Okay. So that's that example. And like you said, in many cases, many people use switch true by default. And yes, you're right. It's not always required. However, there are some legitimate cases for switch true. And my next example is about switch true that's required. So this is the example. Now,
Hmm.
have you seen something similar to this?
I've actually never seen anybody use the true without the open and closed parentheses, but it looks like it still works that way. You don't actually require them at the end of it. I didn't know that. Just it was just something I always put in the first condition for switch.
Okay, well, yeah, it's maybe my personal habit. I don't like the parentheses. I
Hmm.
do realize that it's inconsistent with other functions, let's say. For example, you cannot use today as just, a function
Mm,
name without parentheses, even though it has no
okay.
arguments. Yeah, but true does work, and I just feel like it's cleaner this way.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I agree, but I just learned something new for that. But let's see. We have okay. I'm just checking your conditions. So if the standard cost is less than zero and valid, it looks like for the next one, you have if zero is less than or equal to the standard cost. Interesting. And okay, so the second check is a two-part condition where it's both above
hmm
and then below. Okay.
hmm hmm
For low, medium, and high. Yeah, like I feel like the fairly like standard kind of flag column that you would have to basically provide three buckets in the middle, either an invalid for an error and then an unknown if it's just outside of any of that range. Basically, the alternative result at the end.
yeah, yeah. So something I would think about is, are these double checks necessary? And actually, if we go back to the blog post, I mean this
Hmm.
one of the last formulas here is very similar. It's font size.
Well, and part
So
of it
you
is
see,
if the condition above hasn't been met, is that not already conditioning it to not require the thing, the first part potentially of the next step? So
you're exactly right.
yeah.
Yes.
So and again, part of it can be readable too. It's like sometimes it's having both parts makes it very clear that it's what it's checking, but then it goes to the performance consideration. Does it actually cost more to do a two-part check versus the one? Which in this case, I would assume that you might have a performance impact by doing the double checking the same thing twice across multiple steps.
Yes.
In lieu of making it more readable.
Yep. There is one more thing though.
Mm,
It's not an issue with my example I was showing just before, but I think it is an issue with this example. What if the font size is not an integer? If it's 10,000 and a half, where does it go to? I would argue that it's going to be greater than a million.
okay, yeah.
So it can be a problem. You see, yes, maybe for some people it's easier to read, to understand. I would argue there is some danger here. So what it really should have been is, instead of greater than or equal to 10,001, it should have been greater than 10,000. Like if you wanted to follow this pattern in the first place.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, otherwise, actually, whatever is below zero is also going to be greater than a million, right?
Yep. And it depends on the data type that you have. Is it a whole number? Is it a decimal? But yeah, you want to make sure that you don't accidentally exclude anything between your bucket ranges, for sure. And that comes from just kind of just knowing the data, and then being very careful on greater than or greater than and equal to, and making sure that whatever pattern you do, you want to start fresh and at the appropriate starting and ending point with each of the lines of codes that you're doing. And that can get tricky sometimes.
Yep.
You have to write it all out at first and then kind of double check each, like, all right, from here to here, that's correct. The next thing above it is this number. All right, does it start at that number? And you really just go through each of your condition checks and make sure that the journey from your min to your max never breaks at any point.
Yeah. So let me go back to Power BI. How would I change this? I would probably get rid of these extraneous checks by doing something like this. Get rid of the first part everywhere. Actually, I don't even need this greater than 1,000 and then unknown in other cases, because what's going to be unknown is just not possible that one of the numbers is not covered. So we can get rid of this. So everything else is high, and that's it. Actually, let me default this. I'm not going to save this because I think I had this example prepared before.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, this is much cleaner. And just to compare, this is what we used to have. Like, I would argue this is cleaner. Maybe some people would say it's not as easy to understand.
You don't have your error check though anymore, because in the other one, I'm assuming with the word invalid, is what you're saying is that you shouldn't actually have any numbers below zero. Otherwise, it's kind of bad data. So in a way, the invalid to me is almost a check to make sure that you're not getting bad data. It's like that might be something worth keeping if they have a page that maybe has a flag that goes to a card that actually sends an alert if the word invalid ever shows up, or if a number is ever below zero, because that might actually go towards email notifications for people that are getting a flag in some way.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I just forgot to cover this
Oh yeah,
point. Like, why did I decide to remove invalid? So I get, look, it's probably a bigger discussion than just DAX. It's like, where do you handle issues with data? Is DAX the best place to handle these issues, or should you be handling this in ETL? Like, if you get some cost that is now less than zero, then probably it should be caught during the ETL. However, you don't always have ETL. Sometimes you just have Excel files prepared manually, and that's the basic truth of life. Like, not everyone has the Azure Data Factory or SQL Server integration services or whatever. So yeah, if you need to check your data, by all means, having an extra check for values less than zero or whatever is good.
Yep, and I mean what I tell people as well too is, with any errors or anything else, is are you good to load partial data into your model? Because like you could, for an example, you could have your, let's say, sum of sales. That's it's a calculated value that excludes the word invalid for this check. So you'll still refresh your report every day, but in case you ever start getting some invalid rows, you'll still have a successful refresh. You'll show the new data, but you'll be excluding some rows until they get fixed. So like it lands on the client with the "it depends" consultant answer. Are you okay showing partial data with the ability to go review it, or would you rather basically have the entire refresh fail? So you put something in Power Query that would basically just error and prevent the refresh, and you just simply show yesterday's or 2 days prior data until the data gets fixed. And that's something that the client needs to decide, is like, which is more valuable, current today's data that's slightly incomplete, or just waiting to get a full refresh of all good data once it gets fixed. And it's going to depend on the client, the business, etc.
Yeah, all good points. And like I said, it's probably a much bigger discussion than a simple
Oh,
switch
of course,
formula.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was all I wanted to show for this one. Now, like I said, if Reid and I get interest in this kind of series, then we are happy to continue, because I have more topics I wanted to cover. So let us know, how do you say this, by liking the video, subscribing to Reed's channel. I don't have my channel, so just subscribe to Reed's channel. Follow us on Twitter,
Clicking the like and
LinkedIn.
subscribe button down below. Absolutely. Let me actually switch back to us. There we go. But yeah, this is a recorded video for our first session now, but we're toying with the idea as well of turning this into a live stream as well, to actually have foster some chats and communication as we're going over this stuff. Because I know, like, from all the other streams that I do, we have a lot of good chatter that usually happens during that time. But Daniel, thanks for coming on and doing this. This has been really great, and I love being able to just talk data and dive into a lot of these fun scenarios, because it fosters a lot of good conversations and just fun opinions as well.
Yeah, thanks for hosting me. That's a nice experience. Actually,
Abs-
I think it might be my first first video of this kind. Like, yes, previously I presented at conferences,
yeah,
but it's a bit different. Like, you have like people they're just watching. Mostly they just listen and watch, and very few ask questions. Maybe they will type in a question in the chat, but that's it.
yeah.
So this kind of chat is really nice.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just you get a chance to hang out, and I think we both leave learning a little something. So
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, thanks.
absolutely, yeah. And I'll see you next time we do one of these as well. So thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, or share this video. Plus, if you have any comments for a future video, go ahead and add that to the comment section down below. Now, if this is your first time to my channel, or you want to see more of these awesome videos, please click that subscribe and notification button. Also, feel free to show your support by becoming a channel member.